What's up everybody? In this video, I'll be covering the Resto Druid and all of the reasons why it may or may not be the right healer for you. As with any of my other class picking guides, the goal here is to make your decision easier, so feel free to leave a comment if you have questions. So with that out of the way, Resto Druids. In vanilla, they were known for being generally an undesirable healer, but that does not follow them into TBC. And that's partly due to the several changes that were made to the way that healing over time spells worked. There can now be multiple applications of the same healing over time spell on a single target, and bonus healing from gear has a much greater contribution to their effects. But that's not the only thing that changed with Druids. They received a new talent called Tree of Life, which drastically changed their playstyle. This is a new shapeshift form that's exclusive to the Resto Druid, and like any other Druid shapeshift form, it grants enhanced capabilities for your role, while limiting your ability to use spells outside of your role. While in tree form, you have a 20% reduced cost on all healing over time spells. It's hard to state just how good that is. The secondary benefit that tree form provides is the aura that it gives to your group members. It increases their healing taken by 25% of your total spirit, and that ends up being quite a significant bonus because of the amount of spirit that Resto Druids have on their gear. Like I already mentioned, there are some negatives that come with any Druid shapeshift form, and Tree of Life is no exception. While in tree form, you're limited to casting only healing over time spells, Whitemend, Nature Swiftness, Innervate, Battle Res, and Cure Poison effects. That means you can't cast any damaging spells, crowd controlling spells, healing touch, or decurse without being kicked out of tree form. That sounds bad at first, but most of it doesn't really interfere with your role as a healer. For the most part, TBC raids don't require healers to deal damage, and healing touch is only used in one specific scenario. So that leaves decurse as the one minor annoyance that you'll notice with this restriction. You're still one of the only two classes that are able to decurse, so it's just something you'll have to deal with when it comes up. The other downside to tree form is you move 20% slower in this form. But if you know the mechanics of the fight, you won't actually be affected by this very often. As a druid, you have the incredible perk of being able to heal while moving, and this allows you to pre-position yourself for mechanics before they actually happen. The benefits of tree form far outweigh the negatives, and outside of very specific scenarios, you'll always be in this form, so you'll have to get used to this. Onto the Druid's healing spells, Life Bloom is Resto Druid's new healing over time effect with this expansion. It's easily their most mana efficient heal, and it's incredibly versatile once the Druid understands how it works. The spell ticks every second for 7 seconds. If the Druid doesn't refresh the Life Bloom by the 7th tick, the effect delivers a burst of healing as it expires. However, if the Druid does refresh Life Bloom before it expires, the effect gains an additional stack, and the healing over time portion is doubled. This effect can be stacked up to 3 times for up to triple the initial periodic healing. A 3-stack Life Bloom is an incredible tool for dealing with heavy and sustained damage, particularly on tanks, but Life Bloom has other uses. A 1-stack Life Bloom can be used to top off raid members who have recently received moderate damage. Rejuvenation is another instant healing over time effect, and it offers similar healing to a single stack of Life Bloom, but it delivers that healing at a much slower pace than Life Bloom, and at a significantly higher mana cost too. That doesn't mean Rejuvenation doesn't have its place. For tank healing, it's used in addition to Life Bloom, but maintaining its effect is not nearly as important. But raid healing is where Rejuvenation really shines, even when you compare it to Life Bloom. That's because Rejuvenation enables the use of Whitemend. Whitemend is an instant cast burst heal spell with a very short cooldown. The catch is that you can only use it on targets with an active Rejuvenation or regrowth effect. So when a party member is in critical condition and has no active HOTS, your best course of action is usually to use Rejuvenation and then Whitemend. This combination produces a ton of healing in the span of a global cooldown. But like I mentioned before, a single stack Life Bloom is also a great tool for raid healing, and this choice between Rejuvenation and Life Bloom comes up a lot. While it's pretty obvious that in situations where a large amount of spot healing is required, Rejuvenation is the correct choice. What's not so obvious is the proper spell to use when only a moderate amount of healing is needed. It's this judgment call that defines the skill ceiling for the Resto Druid. Life Bloom heals faster and for much less mana, but Rejuvenation gives you the option to Whitemend the target for the next 12 seconds. It's up for the Druid to anticipate whether or not Whitemend will be needed or could be needed on the target in the next 12 seconds. In order to make the correct call all of the time, The Druid needs to have an intimate understanding of the damage patterns for every fight. So like I said, this is a huge part of mastering the Resto Druid. Regrowth is another healing spell in the Resto Druid's arsenal. It's a 2-second casted spell that has a high initial heal and leaves a moderate heal over time effect. The initial heal of this spell is actually quite strong, due in part to the improved Regrowth talent. The talent gives you a 50% increased chance to critically strike with the initial heal. That's before factoring in your base stats and gear. The heal over time portion of the spell has its place as your third priority hot when assigned to healing a main tank. We'll talk more on healing assignments in a later section. But a lot of the spell's value comes when the Druid is raid healing. You see, Whitemend has a 15-second cooldown, and if several raid members are taking heavy amounts of damage, you can't use Whitemend on all of them. That's where the initial heal from Regrowth comes in. It also has the benefit of leaving a 21-second hot on the target, giving you a much longer window to use Whitemend should they need it. The next healing spell on our list is Tranquility. It's a group healing spell that heals up to 4 of your nearby party members every 2 seconds for 8 seconds. This spell does have a lengthy cooldown of 10 minutes, and it requires the Druid to stand still and channel it for the full 8 seconds. This cooldown is so valuable that you'll probably be assigned to use it at a certain time designated by your raid leader. Last up is Healing Touch, which is a very niche spell for the Druid in TBC. The spell heals for a massive amount, but it has a ridiculously long cast time of 3.5 seconds, and like I said before, it cannot be used in tree form. As a result, there's really only one practical application for it, and that's to be used in conjunction with Nature's Swiftness. Nature's Swiftness is a resto talent that makes your next nature cast an instant cast. So combine that with Healing Touch and you've got the Druid equivalent of Lay on Hands. As for the important non-healing spells, you have Innervate, which is a 3-minute cooldown that can be used on any raid member, including the Druid. It works by increasing the target's spirit-based mana regeneration by 400% and allowing them to fully regenerate mana while casting for 20 seconds. While the Druid does get a lot of mana out of Innervate due to their high levels of spirit, they're pretty mana efficient on their own. This cooldown is often best used for the Holy Priest, which is another healer that uses a lot of spirit, but has a much harder time with mana compared to Druids. Rebirth is the Druid's resurrection spell, and it has the advantage of being usable in combat at the cost of having a 30-minute cooldown. In 25-man raids where there are tons of other healers, having a cooldown-based resurrection spell is typically not a problem. However, it can be very frustrating if you do a lot of 5 and 10-man content. So if you like what you've heard so far, let's talk about the raid assignments that you'll typically receive as a Resto Druid. Sometimes you'll be asked to be a primary raid healer. While Druids are definitely serviceable in this role, Shamans and Priests are typically better, but there are times where it makes sense for a Druid to be a primary raid healer. One example that comes to mind is during the reverberation effect during the Gruul encounter. You may also be asked to serve as a main tank healer. This responsibility is typically reserved for Holy Paladins or improved Divine Spirit Priests, but it's sometimes delegated to a Resto Druid, especially in situations where the main tank healer is going to be crowd controlled. In these cases, the Druid keeps up all his healing over time effects on the main tank before the crowd control lands. These effects stabilize the main tank's health long enough for the Druid to come out of the crowd control and use Whitemend to recover. But while Druids are great main tank healers, it's still not their specialty. The Druid truly shines when he's assigned to healing multiple tanks as well as light spot healing. They can do this efficiently by keeping 3 stacks of Light Bloom on each tank and then using the remaining globals to either heal the raid or pump more healing into the tanks. This assignment is where Druids are the most flexible and fun to play, which is a nice segue into the last section where I'll give you my pro-con list for the Resto Druid in TBC. As a disclaimer, this list is based only on PvE content. I made a PvP guide for healers, which you can find by clicking on the top right of this video frame. So as I just mentioned, Druids are probably the most fun and flexible healers to play, with Priests being a very close second. There's also a lot of decision making on which healing over time spell to use in what situations, and that makes the Druid feel very skillful compared to other healers. And they bring excellent utility with Mark of the Wild, Treeform Aura, Innervate, Battle Res, and Tranquility. On top of that, they're just excellent healers. Their mana efficiency is unparalleled and their throughput is very strong. As for the negatives, you're probably the worst healer for daily questing and gold farming. Also, needing to shapeshift in and out of tree form to perform tasks such as decursing and buffing may annoy some people. And if you're looking to play the all-around best healer, you probably won't find that in a Druid. They're very strong, but not as strong as Resto Shamans or Holy Priests. So, are you going to play a Resto Druid in TBC? If so, leave a comment. If not, still leave a comment. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.